Fluttershy landed in front of her cottage and headed inside. Angel hopped up to greet her in his typical annoyed way when she opened the door. It was later than he'd expected, and he was hungry. What did she expect him to do? Fix himself a sandwich? He tapped his foot impatiently and gestured to his wrist, as if he were wearing a watch. "I know you must be hungry, Angel. Twilight needed to talk to me about some things. About her friends." Angel's irritation faded into guilt when she mentioned them. Maybe this one time he should stop being so demanding. He had seen how Fluttershy was the last couple nights. Even though it took her hours to finally fall asleep, he could hear her from her bedroom upstairs bawling late into the night. At first, it agitated him. He was trying to sleep himself, you know. But as the first night, the night after Pinkie died, became morning, he started to feel bad for her. He knew she was a bit timid and could be over-emotional about some things, but they never lasted all night long before. She told him the next day about what happened to Pinkie, and, for what must have been the first time since she started taking care of him, he was sympathetic. The other animals that stayed in her cottage with her had gone through similar emotional roller coasters over the last few days. Her crying was keeping them up during the nights as well, so they vacated their homes for quieter surroundings until Fluttershy had calmed down a bit. She headed to the kitchen and threw together a nice salad for Angel. He could see that she was still feeling awful, and was pleasantly surprised when she didn't take the easy way out of his late dinner and just give him some pellets. She made a small salad for herself and slowly poked at it. "I don't understand it, Angel. All these terrible things have been happening lately. Now there's only Twilight, Rainbow Dash, and me left," she said, beginning to cry. "I don't know what to do." She laid down on her couch and buried her head in a pillow. Angel hopped up and rubbed her leg, trying to comfort her, but tonight seemed to be going in the same direction as the last few nights were. The bunny sighed and hopped to the door. He took one last look at the sobbing mare before heading out to sleep in his little outdoor house. Fluttershy had fallen asleep a couple hours later. If she wasn't so fatigued from what she had been dealing with recently, she probably could have stayed up all night again, crying. She was sprawled out on her couch, her cheeks matted and stained below her eyes. Her mane was unkempt, and her coat unbrushed. A long howl pierced the silence in the air and scared Fluttershy awake. "What was that?" Almost answering her question, another howl echoed in the darkness. She jumped up and locked her windows and drew her curtains, diving under the couch when she was done. "Don't worry, Fluttershy. There's nothing to be afraid of," a voice said from one of the animal homes overhead. Who's there?" A pink head with two large front teeth and a flat mane popped out of one of the little squirrel enclosures and looked at the frightened pony. The squirrel Pinkie skidded down the little staircase built specially for its occupants and stopped in front of the couch. Fluttershy stuck her head out and smiled. "Oh, Pinkie, is that really you? You look, different." "Of course it's me. What do you think?" She spun around, showing herself off. The Pegasus crawled out from under the sofa and gave the pink squirrel a big hug. "Oh my gosh, you're so cute." Pinkie slipped out of her grip. "Hey, Fluttershy, have you ever wondered what it'd be like to be one of your little critters? I can tell you, it's kind of fun." "Oh yes, Pinkie. I can imagine how nice it'd be to be able to run around free like they do and not have any worries in the world." Fluttershy sighed heavily, happily fantasizing. "Well, come on, let's go." Pinkie cheered, jumping onto Fluttershy's head and ruffling her mane in front of her eyes. She pulled the hair from in the front of her face, and she was in a huge, beautiful meadow, the sun shining and flowers fragrant. Birds flew overhead and sang their happy songs. Fluttershy looked at her hooves and saw that they had been replaced with fuzzy little white feet. She looked over the rest of her body and grinned ecstatically. She had traded her wings for fluffy cotton tail and long, floppy ears. Her long pink mane still remained, and she ran her feet over her whole white, fuzzy body just to see if it was real. The pink squirrel dashed over to her, and she gave chase after her friend. laughing as they jumped around and rolled through the grass. Pinkie ran around and around Bunny Shy as she fell over dizzy. She giggled uncontrollably and sat back up, searching for where the squirrel went. Something was off, though. She wasn't in the meadow anymore. It was a much darker, and bushes were scattered in her line of sight. She looked up and saw the sun barely peeking out through the overgrowth. It almost looked like she was in... She gulped nervously. Pinkie? Where'd you go? She hopped along slowly, trying not to make a sound. A bush in front of her rustled and shook slightly. Pinkie? Tell me that's you? She whimpered. A timber wolf jumped out in front of her and glared at its next meal. Bunny Shy shrieked and ran away as fast as her tiny feet would carry her. She ducked between the foliage, using her agility and small stature to outmaneuver the hungry beast. It was still on her trail, though. The noise she was making and her heavy gasps for breath as she tried to escape were making her easy to keep up with. She came into a clearing and saw a small hole under a rock. She made a beeline for it as the timber wolf jumped out behind her and spotted her running for what she hoped would be safety. Bunny Shy jammed her upper body into the hole and scraped the ground with her hind legs. Just as the timber wolf clamped his jaws shut, she forced herself into the burrow completely. The wolf growled and clawed at the dirt around the opening. Fluttershy turned around and plopped onto her butt, grabbing her chest as she caught her breath. She suddenly felt a tickle on her back. She spun around in her cramped quarters. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she saw a snake flicking its tongue, wondering who this home invader was. She crawled backwards, and a claw scratched onto her back. The wolf buried its snout in the hole and grabbed her by the tail, dragging her out and tossing her like a rag doll. She looked up at the predator as it bared its teeth and drooled in anticipation of its fluffy meal. She screamed as its mouth opened and barreled down on her. Fluttershy snapped awake on her couch, covered in sweat. Her heart was racing, and she was gasping for breath. She remembered what had been upon her a moment ago, and looked at her back. Nothing. She hung her head, trying to calm down and stop herself from throwing up. She went into the kitchen and turned on the sink to splash some water in her face and get the sweat out of her eyes. After cleaning herself up, she walked over to the mirror by her door to check her appearance. She still looked pretty scared, but the feeling was slowly passing. It was just a terrible dream, right? She sighed and laid her head on the mirror for a moment. She jumped in fright when she looked up at the mirror again. Pinkie was staring back at her with a disturbing grin. She looked behind and came nose to nose with the pink pony gazing right at her. The Pegasus jumped again. Hi, Fluttershy. You look upset. What's wrong? Pinkie answered with a frozen smile. Oh, Pinkie, it was terrible. I was a bunny, and we were playing, and I got lost, and... I'm sorry. You know what? You could use a pick-me-up, and I know just what'll make you feel better. What's that? Pinkie put her hooves on Fluttershy's shoulders. I'm going to make you some chocolate. The yellow mare looked away awkwardly. That's nice of you, Pinkie, but I'm not really in the mood for chocolate right now. I'll still make you some chocolate, okay? Realizing she wasn't going to win this argument against Pinkie Pie over anything sweet, she decided and sighed defeatedly. All right, I guess I can have some later or something. That's the spirit, Pinkie cheered. Fluttershy smiled at her friend, who hadn't let go yet. They stood there looking at each other for a moment silently. The yellow Pegasus frowned and cocked an eyebrow. Pinkie? I thought you were going to make me some chocolate now. Pinkie giggled. I did, silly. Fluttershy continued to stare at her friend. You haven't moved, though. I know. The timid mare was getting a little annoyed by Pinkie's games, glaring in irritation. Well, if you want some help, we can go... She tried to point to the kitchen, but suddenly couldn't move. She struggled against her unresponsive limbs, grunting as she tried to force something to give. Pinkie, what's going on? I told you. I made you some chocolate. She turned Fluttershy around to face her reflection, and she stared and started to panic. The Pegasus had somehow become a delicious chocolate bunny. She whined and whimpered as she tried desperately to move. "You know what you remind me of, Fluttershy?" Pinkie asked the reflection. "The Spring Harvest Festival is my second favorite holiday, right behind Nightmare Night. All that candy? Oh, yeah." Pinkie licked her lips. "Can you guess the best part about Spring Harvest Festival?" "Of course you can. The chocolate bunnies. It's always so much fun when you bite their little ears off." Fluttershy screamed as Pinkie lifted her chocolate body into her mouth and bit down on her bunny ears. She laid on the couch yelling at the top of her lungs. Her ears suddenly broke off, bitten all the way through to the bone. Jagged teeth marks remained. Blood poured from the wounds and covered her face. Pinkie looked at the terrified bunny-shaped treat as she indulged her sweet tooth. Even in the dream, the thick red ooze dripped from where her ears just were. "Hoo-hoo! Cheery filling!" She continued chewing and crunching down on something, gasping in delight. "And nuts, too! Delicious! But we're not done yet, Fluttershy. I still have to bite the head off." "No!" she shrieked as Pinkie chomped down on her chocolatey neck. Fluttershy's head rolled onto the floor, severed from her body, leaving spots of blood where it bounced. It came to a stop, and a red pool collected where it laid. Every few seconds, new bite wounds appeared on her legs, her chest, her stomach, having broken from one side and to the other.